Okay. Greetings, everybody that has joined us. And,
Germany, that's cool.
And YouTubers that are watching, and whoever is awesome enough to join in on this. I thought it'd be fun to gather up some Clash writers to read their favorite stories and poems for this spooky, fun season. We're going to kick things off with Cynthia Pelayo, who's going to read The Robber Bridegroom by the Brothers Grimm. Take it away,
cool.
Cynthia.
Okay. Hey, everyone. So, early warning, I'm fighting through a sore throat, so I'm going to try to push through as best as I can. So, The Robber Bridegroom. And there's pictures in this, and I'll show you pictures.
Yay.
All right.
Yeah.
There was once a miller who had a beautiful daughter, and when she was grown up, he became anxious that she should be well married and taken care of. So he thought, if a decent suitor comes and asks for her in marriage, I will give her to him. Soon after, a suitor came forward who seemed very well-to-do, and as the miller knew nothing to complain about him, he promised him his daughter. But the girl did not seem to love him as a bride should love her bridegroom. She had no trust in him. As often as she looked at him or thought about him, she felt a chill in her heart. One day he said to her, "You are to be my bride, and yet you have never been to see me." The girl answered, "I do not know where your house is." Then the bridegroom said, "My house is out there in the dark woods." I'm safe. She began to make excuses and said she could not find the way to it, but the bridegroom said, "You must come out to me and pay me a visit next Sunday. I have already invited company, and I will strew ashes on the path through the wood so that you will be sure to find it." When Sunday came and the girl was supposed to set out on her way, she became fearful, and without quite knowing why, she filled both pockets full of peas and lentils. There were ashes strewn on the path through the wood, but nevertheless, at each step she cast to the right and left a few peas on the ground. So she went on the whole day until she came to the middle of the darkest wood, where it was the darkest, and there she stood at a house, not pleasant in her eyes, for it was dark and sinister. She entered, but there was no one there, and it was completely still. Suddenly, she heard a voice cry, turn back, thou pretty bride. Within this house thou must abide, for here do evil things betide." The girl looked around and perceived that the voice came from a bird who was hanging in a cage by the wall, and again it cried, turn back, thy pretty bride. Within this house thou must not abide, for here do evil things betide." Then the pretty bride went on from one room into another and walked through the whole house, but it was quite empty, with no soul to be found. At last she reached the cellar, and there sat an ancient woman who nodded. "Can you tell me," said the girl, "if my bridegroom lives here?" "Oh, poor child," answered the old woman. "Do you know what has happened to you? You are in a mine of murderers. You thought you were a bride and soon to be married, but death will be your spouse. Your bridegroom wants to take your life. Look here, I have a great kettle of water to set on, and when once they have you in their power, they will cut you in pieces without mercy, cook you, and eat you, for they are cannibals. Unless I have pity on you and save you, you are lost." Then the old woman hid the bride behind a great cask. "Be still as a mouse," said the old woman. "Do not stir or move, or else you are lost. At night, when the robbers are asleep, we will escape. I have been waiting a long time for an opportunity to save me from their power." No sooner was it that the girl had been hidden than the wicked gang entered the house. They dragged another young maid with them. They were drunk and would not listen to her cries and groans. They gave her wine to drink, 3 glasses full, 1 white, 1 red, and 1 of yellow, which caused her heart to burst. Then they ripped off her fine clothes, lay her on a table, and then they cut her beautiful body in pieces and strew salt on it. The poor bride was all the while shaking and trembling behind the cask because she saw what a fate the robbers had intended for her. One of them noticed, on the little finger of the murdered woman, a golden ring, and as he could not draw it off easily, he took an axe and chopped it off, but the finger sprang up and fell on the bride's lap. The robber took up a light to look for it, but he could not find it. Then said one of the others, "Have you looked behind the great cask?" But the old woman cried, "Come and eat and leave off looking till tomorrow. The finger won't run away." Then the robbers said the old woman was right, and they left off searching and sat down to eat, and the old woman drugged their wine, so that before long they stretched themselves in the cellar, sleeping and snoring. When the bride heard that, she came from behind the cask and had to make her way among the sleepers lying all about the ground, and she felt very much afraid lest she might awaken any of them. But God helped her, and she passed quickly through, and the old woman with her. And they unlocked the door and made all haste to leave that house of murderers. The wind had carried away the ashes from the path, but the peas and lentils had budded and sprung up, and the moonshine upon them showed the way. Then went on through the night, till in the morning they reached the mill. Then the girl related to her father all that had happened to her. When the wedding day came, the friends and neighbors assembled, the miller having invited them, and the bridegroom also appeared. When they were all seated at the table, each one had a story to tell. But the bride sat still and said nothing, until at last the bridegroom said to her, "Now, sweetheart, do you not know any story? Tell us something." She answered, "I will tell you about a dream. I was going alone through a wood, and I came at last to a house in which there was no living soul, but by the wall was a bird in a cage who cried, 'Turn back, thy pretty bride. Within this house thou must abide, for here do evil things betide.' And then the bird repeated its chorus, 'Sweetheart, it's only a dream.' Then I went through all the rooms, and they were all empty, and it was so dark and sinister. At last I went down into the cellar, and there sat an ancient woman. She nodded her head. I asked her if my bridegroom lived in that house, and she answered, 'Ah, poor child, you must have come into a mine of murderers. Your bridegroom does live here, but he will kill you and cut you into pieces and then cook and eat you.' Sweetheart, it is only a dream." But the old woman hid me behind a great cask, and no sooner she had done this that the robbers came home, dragging with them a young maid, and they gave her to drink wine thrice, white, red, and yellow, and because of that her heart burst. Sweetheart, it is only a dream. And they killed her. Then they ripped off her fine clothes and cut her into pieces and strew salt on her. Sweetheart, it is only a dream. And then one of the robbers saw a gold ring on the finger of the young woman, and as he could not draw it off easily, he took an axe and chopped it off, but the finger sprang up and fell on my lap, and here is the finger with the ring." At these words, she drew forth the ring and showed it to her company. The robber bridegroom, who during the story had grown deadly white, sprang up and wanted to escape, but the guests held him fast and delivered him up to justice, and then he and his whole gang were executed for their evil deeds. The end. I meant to show chopping up the first murdered woman.
Oh, cool.
Thank you.
Damn. Would you say that's the most gruesome of the Grimms?
There's
I got a lot.
There's a few, like this one has like Grimmiest has like 9 illustrated that are pretty, like the juniper tree is pretty sick, and there's one where a father tries to like have relations with his daughter and he chops off her hands. There's some that are pretty intense.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Pretty grim.
Yeah.
Fucking grim. God damn. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Sina. That was a treat. I always love fairy tales.
Me too.
Damn. I'm gonna have to get that collection. All right, next we have Brian Allen Carr. He's gonna read "And the Earth Did Not Devour Him" by Thomas Rivera.
Cool. So it's actually from a book called "And the Earth Did Not Devour Him," or Se lo trago la tierra, but it's 2 little tiny pieces from it, but like, you got to hear the first piece of the book to hear any of it. So this is called The Lost Year. That year was lost in At times he tried to remember, and just about when he thought everything was clearing up some, he would be at a loss for words. It almost always began with a dream in which he would suddenly awaken and then realize that he was really asleep. Then he wouldn't know whether what he was thinking had happened or not. It always began when he would hear someone calling him by his name, but when he turned his head to see who was calling, he would make a complete turn, and there he would end up in the same place. This is why he could never discover who was calling him or why, and then he even forgot the name he had been called. One time he stopped at mid-turn and fear suddenly set in. He realized that he had called himself, and thus the lost year began. He tried to figure out when that time he had come to call year had started. He became aware that he was always thinking, and from this there was no way out. Then he started thinking about how he never thought, and this was when his mind would go blank and he would fall asleep. But before falling asleep, he saw and heard many things. And this is called the Silvery Night. So this is one of the things that he saw and, heard. Oh, come the fuck on. You ever notice how, like, when you're reading, if you got to find something that fucking moves in the book? Just me.
No, all the time. All the time.
Yeah. Very common.
Thank God.
Sometimes I just give up and just like read something else. I'm just like, all right.
Dude, I got the fucking page dog-eared and everything. All right, here we go. It was a silvery night when he called the devil. Everything was almost clear, and it even smelled like day. The whole day he thought about what could happen to him, but the more he thought about it, the more curious he became and the less fearful. So that by the time everybody went to bed and turned off the lights, he had already decided to go out right at midnight. He would have to slide across the floor to the door without anyone hearing or seeing him. Dad, why don't you leave the door open? There aren't many mosquitoes tonight anyway. Yes, but what if some animal gets in? Remember the badger that got into the Flores? But that was 2 years ago. Come on, leave it open. It's real hot. Nothing's going to get in. All that's left around here are crows, and those don't get into people's houses. Come on, see how all the other people have their doors open. Yes, but they've all got screens. Not all of them, please. See how pretty the moon looks. Everything is so peaceful. All right. No animal is going to get in. The devil had fascinated him as far back as he could remember. Even when they had taken him to the shepherd's place at his Aunt Panya's, he was already curious about how it might look. He thought about Don Reyes with his black male mask, with his red horns and black cape. Then he remembered how he found the costume and the mask under Don Reyes' house. One of his marbles had rolled under the house, and when he reached for it, he found everything all full of dust. He pulled everything out, dusted it off, and then he put on the mask. I tell you, compadre, you don't fool around with the devil. There are many who have summoned him and have regretted it afterwards. Most of them go insane. Sometimes they get together in groups to summon him so they won't be afraid, but he doesn't appear before them until later when each of them is alone, and he appears in different shapes. No, nobody should fool with the devil. If you do, as they say, you give up your soul. Some die of fright, others don't. They just start looking real somber, and then they don't even talk anymore. It's like their spirits have left their bodies. From where he was lying on the floor, he could see the clock on the table. He sensed each of his brothers and sisters falling asleep one by one, and then his parents. He thought he could even make out the sound of snores coming from the other chicken shacks. 11 to 11:50 went by slowest. Occasionally, he felt somewhat fearful, and then he would look outside where everything was so still and serene under the silvery light of the moon, and his fears quickly passed. If I leave here at 11:50, I'll have enough time to get to the center of the knoll. Good thing there's no snakes here, otherwise it'd be dangerous walking through the weeds and grow so tall as the center of the knoll because there's snakes. I'll haul them right at 12. I better take the clock so I know exactly when it's 12. Otherwise, he might not come. It has to be right at midnight, exactly midnight. Very slowly, without making a sound, he left, picking up the clock from the table. He put it in his pants pocket, noticed that it ticked louder inside the pocket than outside the pocket. Even once he was past the chicken coops, he walked very slowly, stepping carefully and stopping every now and then. He felt someone was watching him. He proceeded cautiously until he had passed the outhouse. From there, the chicken coops were barely visible, and he began talking to himself, but very quietly. And how do I call him? Maybe he'll appear. No, I don't think so. In any case, if he does appear, he can't do anything to me. I'm not dead yet, so he can't do anything to me. I'd just like to know whether or not he's there. If there isn't a devil, maybe there also isn't. Nope, better not say. Might get punished. But if there's no devil, maybe there's no punishment. No, there has to be punishment. Well, how do I call him? Just devil or imp or demon, Lucifer, Satan, whatever comes first? He got to the center of the knoll and summoned him. At first, no words came out from pure fright, but then his name slipped out in a loud voice and nothing happened. He kept calling him by different names and nothing. No one came out. Everything looked the same. Everything was the same. All peaceful. Then he thought it would be better to curse the devil instead, so he did. He swore at him using all the cuss words that he knew and in different tones of voices. He even cursed the devil's mother, but nothing, nor no one appeared, nor did anything change. Disillusioned and feeling at moments a little brave, he headed back for the house. The sound of the wind rustling the leaves of the trees seemed to accompany his every step. There was no devil. But if there's no devil, neither is there. Nope, better not say. Might get punished. There's no devil. Maybe he'll appear before me later. No, he would have appeared already. What better time than at night and me alone? No, there's no devil, there isn't. 2 or 3 different times he sensed someone calling him, but he didn't want to turn around. He didn't get scared because he felt sure that it wasn't anyone nor anything. After he laid down, very careful not to make a sound, certain that there was no devil, he began to feel chills and his stomach became upset. Before falling asleep, he thought for a good while, there is no devil, there is nothing. The only thing that had been present in the woods was his own voice. No wonder, he thought. People said you shouldn't fool around with the devil, but now he understood everything. Those who summoned the devil went crazy. Not because the devil appeared, but just the opposite, because he didn't appear. And then he fell asleep gazing at the moon as it jumped through the clouds and the trees as if it was extremely content about something. Thomas Bear, he's good shit.
Wow, that's some good shit, man. Awesome. That was great.
Yeah.
All right, so next we have Clay McLeod Chapman. He's going to read the Hearst Song from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Clay, and I'm gonna read one of my absolute favorites, the Hearst Song from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark by Alvin Schwartz, with amazing illustrations by Stephen Gamble, the original. Sorry, it's all fuzzy. But this is the Hearst Song. Don't ever laugh as the hearse goes by, for you may be the next to die. They wrap you up in a big white sheet from your head down to your feet. They put you in a big black box and they cover you up with dirt and rocks. All goes well for about a week, but then your coffin begins to leak. The worms crawl in, the worms crawl out. The worms play pinochle on your snout. They eat your eyes and they eat your nose. They eat the jelly between your toes. A big green worm with rolling eyes crawls in your stomach and out your eyes. Your stomach turns a slimy green and pus pours out like whipping cream. And you spread it on a slice of bread. And this is what you eat when you are dead. Thank you very much, everybody.
And they're like sheet music for that in the back of the book. I haven't seen the book in forever.
They do they have sheet
Like
music?
the last, second to last page. Is there still piano music for that story?
Not in this version. Wait a minute. The last thing I've got is well, they do the sources, of course, but then no, the Ghost with the Bloody Fingers is the last thing. No music.
That was like monumental to me, that book.
Gosh, I love this book. It still holds up, you know? Thanks for having me, guys.
That was amazing. Holy crap, man.
Great job.
I want to just hire you to just read me stories every night.
I'll do it.
Yeah, that was
Let's
fun.
do it. Let's do it. Come on.
I'll hire you to read my kid to bed. How's that?
Sold.
So good. Oh my God. Okay. All right, so next we have John Skipp. He's gonna read a Dr. Seuss story.
That is correct. It is called What Was I Scared Of? And it originally appeared in notorious extreme horror writer Dr. Seuss's book, The Sneetches. Sneetches is a wonderful story about class consciousness and who has 1 star or 2 stars. It also contains great stories like The Skullfuckers, but they don't talk about that one as much. So, What Was I Scared Of? By Dr. Seuss. I was walking in the night and I saw nothing scary, for I have never been afraid of anything, not very. Oh, shit. Hang on, that's not in there. My pages just jumped. Okay, scrolling back up to the top. I was walking in the night and I saw nothing scary, for I have never been afraid of anything, not very. There I was deep within the woods, when suddenly I spied them. I saw a pair of pale green pants with nobody inside them. I wasn't scared, but yet I stopped. What could these pants be there for? What could a pair of pants at night be standing in the air for? And then they moved. Those empty pants, they kind of started jumping. And in my heart, I must admit, it kind of started thumping. So I got out. I got out fast as I could go, sir. I wasn't scared, but pants like that I did not care for, no, sir. After that, a week went by. Then one dark night in Greenwich, I had to do an errand there and fetch some Greenwich spinach. Well, I had fetched the spinach. I was starting back through town when those pants raced around a corner and they almost knocked me down. I lost my Greenwich spinach, but I didn't even care. I ran for home. Believe me, I had really had a scare. Now, bicycles were never made for pale green pants to ride them, especially spooky pale green pants with nobody inside them. And the next night, I was fishing for doubt trout on Rover River. When those pants came rowing towards me, well, I started in to shiver. And by now I was so frightened, I'll tell you, but I hate to. I screamed and rode away and lost my hook and line and bait too. I ran and found a brickle bush. I hid myself away. I got brickles in my britches, but I stayed there anyway. I stayed all night, the next night too. I'd be there still, no doubt, but I had to do an errand, so the next night I went out. I had to do an errand, had to pick a peck of snide in a dark and gloomy snide field that was almost 9 miles wide. I said, I do not fear those pants with nobody inside them. I said and said and said those words. I said them, but I lied them. Then I reached inside a snide bush, and the next thing that I knew, I felt my hand touch someone, and I'll bet that you know who. And there I was, caught in the snide, and in that dreadful place, those spooky empty pants and I were standing face to face. I yelled for help. I screamed, I shrieked, I howled, I yelled, I cried. Oh, save me from those pale green pants with nobody inside. But then a strange thing happened. Why, those pants began to cry. Those pants began to tremble. They were just as scared as I. I never heard such whimpering, and I began to see that I was just as strange to them as they were strange to me. So I put my arm around their waist and sat right down beside them. I calmed them down, poor empty pants with nobody inside them. And now we meet quite often, those empty pants and I. We never shake or tremble. We both smile and we say, hi. End scene.
Woo!
Awesome.
Awesome.
It's a really nice story, right?
Very nice.
It's Dr. Seuss's favorite story, too, that he ever wrote.
Is it really?
I think it is, yeah.
Well, good. I mean, I love so many of those stories, but that one's been, I think that was the first ghost story I ever heard.
Wow.
No, I've never actually heard that one before.
It's really good, yeah. And the blue color scheme, everything is blue except for the little guy in the pants.
Except for the little green pants, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great book. My son, I read this book about 10,000 times. So.
Big fan.
Hell yeah. Good job, man. Wow. Yeah, I did not expect to see a Dr. Seuss story in this.
Extreme horror writer, Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, notorious.
That was incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, next we have Victoria Dalpe. She's going to read Into the Wood by Robert Eichmann.
Yeah, so I decided to go stodgy and British, so but this is an excerpt from a longer story by Robert Aickman, which if you're not a fan of, I would highly recommend. He's kind of the master of like a creeping dread. He's really good at setting, he's definitely in the weird fiction family, and he definitely, like, he sets moods and is really disorienting in the way. And so this story, I'm picking up, it's already started, but it's a couple, they're in Sweden, the husband's there for work and the wife's just kind of hanging around bored, and she sees a resort in the woods on a hike and she decides to go there even though the locals advise against it. And so this is right after she arrived and she's kind of getting a lay of the land, and so she's there by herself in Sweden. From experience of other continental hotels, Margaret had rather expected that someone would inquire solicitously or pester, according as one saw it, about her lunch. In fact, there was no one about at all, not even behind the hotel desk, nor was there a sound, not even of birds without. The big front door stood wide open, and the hall was like a temple into which sunlight streamed through every aperture, stirring the stained glass nymphs across the white tiled floor. She imagined that people would be sitting about on the terrace, as she had seen them when she had driven past, but there proved to be no one. She stood by the balustrade, enthralled, though a little oppressed also, by the immensity of sunlit green. The sun was almost directly overhead and really hot. Margaret took off her anorak and sat down in one of the brightly colored terrace chairs, uncertain what to do next. She noticed that almost every window in the hotel seemed to be wide open, possibly a consequence of the hotel's sanatorium function. She noticed also that below the terrace on this side, the opposite side from the road, itself a minor one, ran a path, and it emerged from the woodland on her right and entered the woodland on her left. For some reason, it made her think of the track along which the figures pass when a medieval cathedral clock strikes the hour, and she expected to see a red-eyed dragon emerge from one of the green tunnels with a jeweled St. George in pursuit and disappear into the other tunnel, eternally unconquered, though hourly beset. Out of the forest, as Margaret sat in the hot sun, came not St. George, but a bustling, gray-haired woman in a red dress carrying illustrated papers. Obviously a hotel resident, she ascended the steps to the terrace. "Good afternoon," she said to Margaret, staring at her clothes. "You're a newcomer." The woman could not have been anything but a lady from England. "It's unfortunate that I cannot in all honesty wish you a happy stay." Margaret supposed that she was a trifle eccentric, as the English abroad are so often said to be. "I'm only here for 2 nights," she said, smiling. "Really?" exclaimed the English lady. "A casual. We get very few casuals nowadays. So much the worse, perhaps, but it's connected with changing tastes. There's nothing to do here, you know. Absolutely nothing. What made you come here?" "I drove past it with some Swedish friends and liked the look of it. A pity your Swedish friends didn't tell you that this is not an ordinary hotel. Some of them must have known perfectly well. Most people in Sweden know, and a good many elsewhere, too." "But my friends did tell me," said Margaret. "They warned me it was partly a sanatorium. As a matter of fact, they more or less advised me against coming here. I just didn't think the reasons were very good. As far as I was concerned, anyway. I wanted the sun, and I wanted not to have to wear my best clothes all the time. That was all. I wanted a rest for 2 days, you know." "I see," said the English lady. "But won't you sit down?" "Thank you. I had better introduce myself. I'm Sandy Slater. At least that's what I've always been called. No one ever called me Alexandra. Mrs. Slater, by the way, though my marriage was a little more than a formality. I was born a Brockveer. I'm Margaret Sawyer. I've always been called Molly, but I like it less than I did. Mrs. too. My husband's concerned with building the new road. I understand that a new road will make little difference to John Blyke's Kerr house. The authorities have taken care to keep us at a distance. Is that a good thing? I imagine that the owners mightn't think so. One of my Swedish friends actually said the Kerr house ought to go into more attracting motorists." "He must have been a very ignorant man," said Mrs. Slater. "I notice that many Swedes are nowadays, if you'll forgive my saying so about a friend of yours." "Oh, that's all right," said Margaret. "They're friends of my husband's, or not even that, more business acquaintances." "Clearly," Mrs. Slater in a calm voice, you have no idea what this place is. Why do you suppose it's called Jamblichus Kerr house?" "I didn't know it was until you just mentioned it. It doesn't seem to be up anywhere. I suppose he was some 19th century German doctor who invented a patent treatment. So many of them seem to have done it. Jamblichus was one among the 7 sleepers who, after had slept for 2 centuries, went down into the town in order to buy food, tendered the obsolete coins, and found himself arrested. Don't you remember your Gibbon? You mean the decline and fall? I'm afraid I've never had time for it. I have 3 children to look after, you know. It's different here, she said weightily. This, my dear, and Mrs. Sawyer, how odd our husband's name should be so similar, is an establishment for insomniacs. One can hardly call it a hotel because hotels are primarily places to sleep in. Still less can one call it a cure because there is no cure. I noticed a book in my room, began Margaret, then reflected, how terrible. Do you mean you suffer from it? Not as badly as some, including summer here. I usually get a few hours in the course of a week. Some of the people here haven't slept for years, but that's impossible. But you mean they haven't slept regularly for years? I mean that for years they have not slept at all, not at all, never. Mrs. Slater seemed still to be speaking quite calmly. But surely, inquired Margaret timidly, surely you can't live without sleep. You can. In a way, you can live here. What is there special about here? And why do people who have difficulty in sleeping have to live with other people who have difficulty in sleeping? I know very little about it, I'm afraid, because I seem to have always slept rather well. I should have thought that living altogether would be the very worst thing for them. When the trouble passes a certain point, a point far shorter of never sleeping at all, I assure you, the victim is driven out. Sleepers cannot live for long with an insomniac. It's like living with something supernatural. People who are normal come to feel it as a shadow on their own lives, and they come to feel it quite soon. And I think I can stop there. So, hopefully, I will have wet a whistle for what a weird resort filled with insomniacs who never sleep do.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's a really great story. So I highly
I
recommend
can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Next, we have Larissa Glasser. She's going to read an excerpt from Sartre's The Wall. Good and
Nice.
classy over here.
I don't know.
There we go. Yeah.
Thanks, Lisa. Am I on? Hello, testing 1, 2. Can people hear me? Okay, good.
Yes.
Thank you. This, I mean, you think of Sartre and you sort of associate him with, you know, college level existentialism, but he really wrote across forms. And this story has haunted me since I was a kid because it's about political prisoners that really resonates with me. And sort of takes place during the Spanish Civil War, during which my dad was actually a spy. So maybe that's a extra familial connection. Maybe I'm just haunted by my dad in this as well. The Wall. They pushed us into a big white room and I began to blink because the light hurt my eyes. Then I saw a table and 4 men behind the table, civilians looking over the papers. They had a bunch of group of prisoners in the back and we had to cross the whole room to join them. There were several I knew and some others who must have been foreigners. The 2 in front of me were blonde with round skulls. They looked alike. I suppose they were French. The smaller one kept hitching up his pants. Nerves. It lasted about 3 hours. I was dizzy and my head was empty, but the room was well heated and I found that pleasant enough. For the past 24 hours, we hadn't stopped shivering. The guards brought the prisoners up to the table one after another. The 4 men asked each of us name and occupation. Most of the time they didn't go any further, or they would simply ask a question here and there, like, did you have anything to do with the sabotage of munitions? Or where were you on the morning of the 9th and what were you doing? They didn't listen to the answers, or at least didn't seem to. They were quiet for a moment and then looking straight in front of them began to write. They asked Tom if it were true he was in the International Brigade. Tom couldn't tell them otherwise because of the papers they found in his coat. They didn't ask Juan anything, but they wrote for a long time after he told them his name. My brother Jose is the anarchist, Juan said. You know, he isn't here anymore either. I don't belong to any party. I never had anything to do with politics. They didn't answer. Juan went on, I haven't done anything. I don't want to pay for somebody else. His lips trembled. A guard shut him up and took him away. It was my turn. Your name is Pablo Bieta? Yes. The man looked at his papers now and asked me, where's Raymond Gris? I don't know. You hid him in your house from the 6th to the 19th. No. They wrote for a minute, and then the guards took me out. In the corridor, Tom and Juan were waiting between two guards. We started walking. Tom asked one of the guards, So? So what? The guard said. Was that the cross-examination or the sentence? Sentence, the guard said. What are they going to do with us? The guard answered dryly, Sentence will be read in your cell. As a matter of fact, our cell was one of the hospital cellars. It was terrifically cold there because of the drafts. We shivered all night, and there wasn't much better to do during the day. I'd spent the previous day in a cell in a monastery, a sort of hole in the wall that must have dated from the Middle Ages. Since there were a lot of prisoners and not much room, they just pretty much locked us up anywhere. I didn't miss my cell. I hadn't suffered too much from the cold, but I was alone in a long time. That really gets irritating. In the cellar, I had company. Juan hardly ever spoke. He was afraid and he was too young to have anything to say. But Tom was a good talker and he knew Spanish well. There was a bench in the cellar and 4 mats. They took us to the back and we waited in silence. After a long moment, Tom said, We're screwed. I think so too, I said. I don't think they'll do anything to the kid. They don't have a thing against him, said Tom. He's the brother of a militiaman, and that's all. I looked at Juan. He didn't seem to hear us. Tom went on, You know what they do in Zaragoza? They lay the men down on the road and run them over with trucks. A Moroccan deserter told us that. He said it was to save on ammunition. Well, it doesn't save on gas, I said. I was annoyed at Tom. He shouldn't have said that. Then there's officers walking along the road, he went on, supervising it all. They stick their hands in the pockets and smoke cigarettes. You think they finish off these guys? Hell no. They let them scream, sometimes for an hour. The Moroccan told me he damn near puked the first time. I don't think they'll do that here, I said, unless they're really short on ammunition. Day was coming in through 4 air holes and a round opening, and they made in the ceiling and on the left, and you could see the sky through it. Through this hole, usually covered by a trap, they unloaded coal into the cellar. Just below the hole, there was a big pile of coal dust. It had been used to heat the hospital, but since the beginning of the war, the patients were evacuated and the coal stayed there unused. Sometimes it even got rained on because they'd forgotten to close the trap door. Tom began to shiver. Jesus Christ, I'm cold. Here it goes again. He got up and began to do exercises. Each moment, his shirt opened on his chest, white and hairy. He lay on his back, raised his legs in the air, and began to bicycle. I saw his great rump trembling. Tom was husky and he had too much fat. I thought about how rifle bullets or the sharp points of bayonets would soon be sunk into the massive tender flesh as in a lump of butter. It wouldn't have made much difference if I'd thought he'd been thin. I wasn't exactly cold, but I couldn't feel my arms and shoulders anymore. Sometimes I had the impression I was missing something and began to look around for my coat and then suddenly remembered they hadn't given me a coat. It was rather uncomfortable. They took our clothes and gave them to soldiers, leaving us only our shirts and those canvas pants that hospital patients wear in the middle of the summer. After a while, Tom got up and sat next to me, breathing heavily. Are you warmer? Christ, no, but I'm out of wind. Around 8 o'clock in the evening, a major came in with 2 Falangistas. He had a sheet of paper in his hand. He asked the guard, What are the names of those 3? Steinbach, Ibieta, and Mirbal, the guard said. The major put on his eyeglasses and scanned the list. Steinbach. Oh yes, you're sentenced to death. You will be shot tomorrow morning. He went on looking. The other 2 as well. That's not possible, one said. Not me. The major looked at him, amazed. What's your name? Juan Mirbal, he said. Well, your name is there. You're on the list. You're sentenced. I didn't do anything, Juan said. The major shrugged his shoulders and turned to Tom and me. You're Basque? Nobody is Basque. He looked annoyed. They told me there were 3 Basques. I'm not going to waste my time looking for them. Well, naturally you don't want a priest then? We didn't even answer. He said, a Belgian doctor is coming in shortly. He's authorized to spend the night with you. He made a military salute and left. What did I tell you? Tom said. We get it. Yeah, I said. It's a rotten deal for the kid. I said that to be decent, but I didn't like the kid. His face was too thin, and fear and suffering had disfigured it, twisting all his features. 3 days before, he was a smart sort of kid, not too bad, but now he looked like an old fairy, and I thought how he'd never be young again, even if they were to let him go. It wouldn't have been hard for me to have a little pity for him, but pity disgusts me, or rather, it horrifies me. He hadn't said anything more, and he had turned gray. His face and hands were both gray. He sat down again and looked at the ground with round eyes. Tom was good-hearted, and he wanted to take his arm, but the kid tore himself away violently and made a face. "Leave him alone," I said in a low voice. "You can see he's going to blubber." Tom obeyed regretfully. He would have liked to have comforted the kid. It would have passed the time, and he wouldn't have been tempted to think about himself, but it annoyed me. I never thought about death because I'd never had any reason to, but now the reason was here, and there was nothing to do but think about it. Tom began to talk again. "So you think you've knocked guys off, do you?" he asked me. I didn't answer. I'm gonna leave it there. The rest of the story is really gnarly.
Wow.
I definitely want to read the rest of it.
Some heavy
Yeah,
stuff.
it's brutal. It's really good.
Damn. Kind of reminded me of Kafka.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
that in a
definitely.
collection?
Oh, I think it's New Directions Press. Yeah, it's New Directions. Just the Wall. You can find it in any library, I'll bet.
Oh, cool.
It's
It's like a bunch of novellas, right? Or is it?
yeah. There's about five long stories in this book, and
Yeah.
actually there's some stories in here that are more brutal than The Wall. So take it from a librarian. It's good.
Yeah, that definitely, that was another unexpected one along with the Dr. Seuss. I was like, oh yeah, Sartre? Okay. And it definitely belongs. That definitely belongs in a horror reading.
They're like the same person.
Yeah.
Dr. Sartre.
That's right. That's what I'm saying.
The collab that never happened.
Never too late.
Yeah.
All he had to do was make his way to Geisel's house.
Jean-Paul Seuss.
Now, I would have liked to have seen that happen.
That would be perfect. Okay. All right. Next we have Michael Seidlinger. He's going to read a Brian Evanson story.
Yeah. So I basically, whenever when we first started talking about this reading, this was like the first thing I thought of, and just like Brian Evanson is amazing at well-rendered horror fiction, specifically when he does the shorter stuff. So immediately thought of this story, and yeah, I hope you like it. So it's called "No Matter Which Way We Turned" by Brian Evanson. No matter which way we turned, the girl, she didn't have a face. There was hair in front and hair in back. Only saying which was the front and which was the back was impossible. I got Skipp to look on one side and I looked from the other, and the other members of the lodge just tried to hold her gently, or not so gently, in place. But no matter which way we looked, no matter how we looked or held her face, she just wasn't there. Her mother was screaming, blaming us, but what could we do about it? We were not to blame. There was nothing we could have done. It was Verl Cram who got the idea of calling out to the sky, calling out after the lights had receded, to tell them to come and take her. You've taken half of her, he shouted. You've taken the same half of her twice. Now goddamn have the decency to take the rest of her. Some of the others joined in, but they didn't come back. None of them. They left, and they left us with the girl, who, no matter how you looked at her, you saw her from the back. She didn't eat, or if she did so in a way we couldn't see. She just kept turning in circles, walking backwards, knocking into things, trying to grab things with the backs of her hands. She was a whole girl made of two half girls, but wrongly made, of two of the same halves. After a while, we couldn't hardly bear to look at her. In the end, we couldn't think of what to do except leave her. At first, her mother protested a bit and clawed, but in the end, she didn't want to take her, either. She just wanted to feel better about letting her go, to have the blame rest on us. So we nailed planks across the door and boarded up the windows. At Verla's request, we left the hole in the roof in the hopes that they would come back for her. For a while, we posted a sentry outside the door, who reported to the lodge on the sound of her scrabbling within. But once the noise stopped, we gave up as well. Late at night, though, I dreamed of her, not the doubled half of the girl we had, but the doubled half we didn't. I saw her miles above us in an air rarefied and thin, not breathable by common means at all, floating within their vessel. There she was, a girl who, no matter where you turned, always faced you, a girl who bared her teeth and stared and stared. So yeah.
All right.
Evanson, yeah.
Yeah, yo.
That was incredible.
That was the first story of his I ever read, and it just
Right?
floored me.
Like, it's so subtle the way he does it, and it just creeps up on you. It's all like that. So I think this one's from his not his latest one, but the one that won the Stoker, I want to say, like Songs for the Unraveling of the World. Yeah, it's in that one.
Yeah, I gotta get that.
It's so good.
I need a list of books to read from this.
Yeah, nice. It's nice to have somebody reading somebody that I can tag who's alive. That's
Yeah, I know, right?
I can't tag.
Can they join the Zoom is the question.
Okay. Next we have Brendan Vidito. He's gonna read The Leper by Algernon Swinburne.
Is Garrett going next? Are we still?
Yeah, those guys are switching around.
He's reading at the end. Yeah. And Kyle's reading after you.
Okay, so I still in the slot.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so this is probably the most antiquated piece so far.
What year?
Oh God, I don't have the date here, but it kind of reminds me a bit, this one, of Poe, like specifically Annabelle Lee, but because it's Swinburne, it has more of a kind of a transgressional edge to it. So yeah, this is called The Leper.
Nice.
Nothing is better, I well think, than love. The hidden well water is not so delicate to drink. This was well seen of me and her. I served her in a royal house. I served her wine and curious meat. For will to kiss between her brows, I had no heart to sleep or eat. Mere scorn God knows she had of me, a poor scribe, no wise great or fair, who plucked his clerk's hood back to see her curled up lips and amorous hair. I vex my head with thinking this, yea, though God always hated me, and hates me now that I can kiss her eyes, plait up her hair to see how she then wore it on her brows, yet am I glad to have her dead, here in this wretched wattled house, where I can kiss her eyes and head. Nothing is better, I well know, than love. No amber in cold sea, or gather berries under snow. This is well seen of her and me. 3 thoughts I make my pleasure of. First, I take heart and think of this, that knight's gold hair she chose to love, his mouth she had such will to kiss. Then I remember that sundawn, I brought him by a privy way, out at her lattice, and thereon what gracious word she found to say. Cold rushes for such little feet, both feet could lie into my hand. A marvel was it of my sweet, her upright bodies could so stand. Sweet friend, God give you thank and grace. Now am I clean and whole of shame, nor shall men burn me in the face for my sweet fault that scandals them. I tell you over word by word, she, sitting edgewise on her bed, holding her feet, said thus, a third, a sweeter thing than these, I said. God, that makes time then ruins it, and alters not, abiding God. Changed with disease her body sweet, the body of love wherein she abode. Love is more sweet and comelier than a dove's throat strained out to sing. All they spat out and cursed at her, and cast her forth for a base thing. They cursed her, seeing how God had wrought this curse to plague her, a curse of his. Fools were they surely, seeing not how sweeter than all sweet she is. He that had held her by the hair, with kissing lips blinding her eyes, felt her bright bosom stained and bare, sigh under him with short, mad cries. Out of her throat and sobbing mouth, and body broken up with love, With sweet hot tears his lips were loath, her own should taste the savor of. Yea, he inside whose grasp all night her fervent body leapt or lay, stained with sharp kisses, red and white, found her a plague to spurn away. I hid her in this wattled house, I served her water and poured bread, for joy to kiss between her brows, time upon time I was nigh dead. Bread failed, we got but well water, and gathered grass with dropping seed. I had such joy of kissing her, I had small care to sleep or feed. Sometimes when service made me glad, the sharp tears leapt between my lids, falling on her, such joy I had, to do the service God forbids. I pray you let me be at peace, get hence, make room for me to die. She said that, her poor lips would cease, put up to mine and turn to cry. I said, bethink yourself how love fared in us twain, what either did, shall I enclothe my soul thereof, that I should do this God forbid? Yea, though God hateth us, he knows that hardly in a little thing, love faileth of the work it does, till it grow ripe for gathering. 6 months, and now my sweet is dead, a trouble takes me, I know not. If all were done well, all well said, no word or tender deed forgot. Too sweet for the least part in her, to have shed life out by fragments. Yet, could the closed mouth catch breath and stir, I might see something I forget. 6 months, and I sit still, and hold in 2 cold palms her 2 cold feet. Her hair, half gray, half ruined gold, thrills me and burns me in kissing it. Love bites and stings me through to see her keen face made of sunken bones. Her worn-off eyelids madden me, that were shot through with purple once. She said, be good with me. I grow so tired for shame's sake. I shall die if you say nothing. Even so. And she is dead now, and shame put by. Yea, in the scorn she had of me, in the old times doubtless vexed her then. I should never have kissed her. See what fools God's anger makes of men. She might have loved me a little too, had I been humbler for her sake. But that new shame could make love new, she saw not, yet her shame did make. I took too much upon my love, having for such mean service done, her beauty and all the ways thereof, her face and all the sweet thereon. Yea, all this while I tended her, I know the old love held fast his part. I know the old scorn waxed heavier, mixed with sad wonder in her heart. And well, it may well be all my love went wrong, a scribe's work writ awry and blurred, scrawled after the blind even song, spoilt music with no perfect word. But surely I would fain have done all things the best I could, perchance because I failed, came short of one. She kept at heart that other man's. I am grown blind with all these things. It may be now she hath in sight some better knowledge. Still there clings the old question, will not God do right? Thank you.
Hooray.
Oh, wow.
Whoa. Yeah, that is a bit like a little more hardcore Poe.
Yeah, it goes a little further than where Poe would go.
Yeah, I just looked him up. So he was born in 1837, died in 1909.
All I really know, he was known to frequent whipping parlors in his day. He was one of those decadent aristocrats that drank too much and did too much opium.
Nice.
Those guys.
Yeah, those guys.
One of those guys.
Probably the kind of guy I would have been if I'd had the money then. Really me, man.
That's funny.
That was great.
What?
Okay, so next we have Kyle Muntz, who's going to read an excerpt from A Distant Mirror by Barbara
Tuckman. All right, yeah, so speaking of antiquated, this is actually from just a book of history. It's this big 1,000-page history of medieval Europe. but this chapter, I should have given you the name of the chapter. It's called This is the End of the World. And it's a chapter about the Black Death. And I just kind of went through the chapter and I took a bunch of my favorite details and kind of put them together. So that's what I'm going to read.
Cool.
In October 1347, trading ships put into the harbor of Messina with dead and dying men at the oars. The diseased sailors showed strange black swellings about the size of an egg or an apple in the armpit and groins. The swellings oozed blood and pus and were followed by spreading boils and black blotches on the skin from internal bleeding. The sick suffered severe pain and died within 5 days of the first symptoms. As the disease spread, other symptoms appeared of continuous fever and spitting of blood. These victims coughed and sweated heavily and died even more quickly, within 3 days or less, sometimes in 24 hours. In both types, everything that issued from the body smelled foul. Breath, sweat, blood from the lungs, bloody urine, and blood-blackened excrement. Depression and despair accompanied the physical symptoms, and before the end, some said that death could be seen seated on the face. Rumors of a terrible plague supposedly arising from China had reached Europe in 1346. They told of a death toll so devastating that all of India was said to be depopulated, whole territories covered by dead bodies, other areas with no one left alive. In the absence of a concept of contagion, no serious alarm was felt in Europe until the trading ships brought their black burden of pestilence into Messina. In crowded Avignon, it was said, 400 died daily. 7,000 houses emptied by death were shut up. A single graveyard received 11,000 corpses in 6 weeks. Half the city's inhabitants reportedly died. When graveyards filled up, bodies at Avignon were thrown into the Rhone until mass burial pits were dug for dumping the corpses. In London, the corpse pits overflowed. Everywhere, records speak of the sick dying too fast for the living to bury. Corpses were dragged out of homes and left in front of doorways. Morning light revealed new piles of bodies. In Florence, when attempts to gather the dead failed, the corpses lay putrid in the streets for days at a time. Families dumped their own relatives into the pits or buried them so hastily and thinly that dogs dragged them forth and devoured their bodies. In another place, villagers were seen dancing to drums and trumpets, and on being asked the reason, answered that seeing their neighbors die day by day while their village remained immune, they believed they could keep the plague by entering by what they called the jollity that is in us, and that is why we dance. Further north, on the border of Flanders, the passing bells rang all day and all night. Filled with the sound of mourning, the city became oppressed by fear, so that the authorities forbade the tolling of bells and the wearing of black, and restricted funeral services to 2 mourners. To the people at large, there could be but one explanation: the wrath of God. Barefoot in sackcloth, penitents wound through the streets, sprinkled with ashes, weeping, praying, tearing their hair, carrying candles and relics, sometimes with ropes around their necks or beating themselves with whips, imploring the mercy of the Virgin and saints at their shrines. The demonic, which shared the medieval cosmos with God, appeared as demons in the shape of dogs to terrify the people. And they say a black dog with a drawn sword in his paws appeared among them, gnashing his teeth and rushing upon them and breaking all the silver vessels and the lamps and the candlesticks on the altars. Scandinavians believed that a pest maiden emerged from the mouth of the dead in the form of a blue flame and flew through the air to infect the next house. In Lithuania, the maiden was said to wave a red scarf through the door or a window to let in the pest. In the countryside, peasants dropped dead on the roads, in the fields, in their houses. Survivors in growing helplessness fell into apathy, leaving ripe wheat uncut and livestock untended. Cases of parents deserting children and children their parents were reported across Europe from Scotland to Russia. Father abandoned child, wife husband, one brother another, and no one could be found to bury the dead for money or friendship. And no bells tolled, wrote a chronicler of Siena, and nobody wept, no matter his loss, because almost everyone expected death. And people said and believed, this is the end of the world. This is the end of the world. Our God has punished us, and now we must pay for our sins. No generations will follow us. No more will mortals live upon the earth. No more will we blaspheme this world he has created. This is the end of the world. This must be the end of the world. This is the end of everything. Thanks.
Oh, man.
Quite relevant.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Yeah, I was like, wow, this is way more familiar than I thought it was.
It's the end of the world, and I feel fine.
It's the end of the world as we know it. Are we all feeling fine?
Yeah.
I'm feeling good.
Yeah, why not?
Fuck, man. That was some heavy shit.
Damn.
Wow.
The question is, Kyle, is it heavier or as heavy as that one part of 2666, the part about the crimes where it's just like 80 to like, was it like over 100 pages of just death?
It's kind of similar, right? But I was reading it and I was like, this is terrifying. This is crazy shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of see a similarity for sure. Yeah.
Wow. Woo. Okay. All right.
My
So
friend keep blowing up my phone. Maybe hello, I'm in a meeting.
on that cheerful note, let's go to
Yeah.
Brett Petersen.
Woo!
I'm gonna read an H.P. Lovecraft story.
Yay, Brett.
Woo! Funny man.
Yep. So basically, this is one of H.P. Lovecraft's like lesser known stories. It's one that he modeled after Lord Dunsany. I don't know if you know who he is, but it's called Celophaeus, and it's one of my favorite Lovecraft stories. So here it goes. In a dream, Karanes saw the city in the valley, and the sea coast beyond, and the snowy peak overlooking the sea, and the gaily painted galleys that sail out of the harbor toward the distant regions where the sea meets the sky. In a dream, it was also that he came by his name of Karanes, for when awake, he was called by another name. Perhaps it was natural for him to dream a new name, for he was the last of his family and alone among the indifferent millions of London, so there were not many to speak to him and remind him who he had been. His money and lands were gone, and he did not care for the ways of people around him, but preferred to dream and write of his dreams. What he wrote was laughed at by those to whom he showed it, so that after a time he kept his writings to himself and finally ceased to write. The more he withdrew from the world about him, the more wonderful became his dreams, and it would have been quite futile to try to describe them on paper. Karanes was not modern, and did not think like others who wrote. Whilst they strove to strip from life its embroidered robes of myth, and to show in naked ugliness the foul thing that is reality, Karanes sought for beauty alone. When truth and experience failed to reveal it, he sought it in fancy and illusion, and found it on his very doorstep, amid the nebulous memories of childhood, tales, and dreams. There are not many persons who know what wonders are open to them in the stories and visions of their youth. For when as children we listen and dream, we think half-formed thoughts, and when as men we try to remember, we are dulled and prosaic with the poison of life. But some of us awake in the night with strange phantasms of enchanted hills and gardens, of fountains that sing in the sun, of golden cliffs overhanging murmuring seas, of plains that stretch down to sleeping cities of bronze and stone, and of shadowy companies of heroes that ride caparisoned white horses along the edges of thick forests. And then we know that we have looked back through the ivory gates into that world of wonder, which was ours before we were wise and unhappy. Karanes came very suddenly upon his old world of childhood. He had been dreaming of the house where he was born, the great stone house covered with ivy, where 13 generations of his ancestors had lived, and where he had hoped to die, It was moonlight, and he had stolen out into the fragrant summer night, through the gardens, down the terraces, past the great oaks of the park, and along the white road to the village. The village seemed very old, eaten away at like the edge of the moon, or eaten away at the edge like the moon, which had commenced to wane. And Kuranes wondered whether the peaked roofs of the small houses hid sleep or death. In the streets were spears of long grass, and the window panes on either side were either broken or filmily staring. Kuranes had not lingered, but had plodded on as though summoned towards some goal. He dared not disobey the summons for fear it might prove an illusion like the urges and aspirations of waking life, which do not lead to any goal. Then he had been drawn down a lane that led off from the village street toward the Channel Cliffs, and had come to the end of things, to the precipice and the abyss where all the village and all the world fell abruptly into the unechoing emptiness of infinity, and where the sky ahead was empty and unlit by the crumbling moon and the peering stars. Faith had urged him on, over the precipice and into the gulf, where he had floated down, 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 past dark, shapeless, undreamed dreams, faintly glowing spheres that may have been partly dreams, and laughing winged things that seemed to mock the dreamers of all the worlds. Then a rift seemed to open in the darkness before him, and he saw the city of the valley glistening radiantly far, far below, with a background of sea and sky and a snow-capped mountain near the shore. Kuranes had awaked the very moment he beheld the city, yet he knew from his brief glance that it was none other than Seliphaeus, in the city, or in the valley of Uth-Nargai beyond the Tanarian hills, where his spirit had dwelt all the eternity of an hour one summer afternoon very long ago, when he had slipped away from his nurse and let the warm sea breeze lull him to sleep as he watched the clouds from the cliff near the village. He had protested then, when they had found him, waked him, and carried him home, for just as he was aroused, he had been about to sail in a golden galley for those alluring regions where the sea meets the sky. And now he was equally resentful of awaking, for he had found his fabulous city after 40 weary years. But 3 nights afterward, Kuranes came again to Seliphaeus. As before, he dreamed first of the village that was asleep or dead, and of the abyss down which one must float silently. Then the rift appeared again, and he beheld the glittering minarets of the city, and saw the graceful galleys riding at anchor in the blue harbor, and watched the ginkgo trees of Mount Aran swaying in the sea breeze. But this time he was not snatched away, and like a winged being settled gradually over a grassy hillside till finally his feet rested gently on the turf. He had indeed come back to the valley of Uth-Nargai and the splendid city of Seliphaeus. Down the hill amid scented grasses and brilliant flowers walked Kuranes, over the bubbling Naraxa on the small wooden bridge where he had carved his name so many years ago, and through the whispering grove to the great stone bridge by the city gate. All was as of old, nor were the marble walls discolored, nor the polished bronze statues upon them tarnished. And Kuranes saw that he need not tremble lest the things he knew be vanished, for even the sentries on the ramparts were the same, and still as young as he remembered them. When he entered the city, past the bronze gates and over the onyx pavements, the merchants and camel drivers greeted him as if he had never been away. And it was the same at the turquoise temple of Nath Horthoth, where the orchid-wreathed priest told him that there is no time in Uth-Nargai, but only perpetual youth. Then Kuranes walked through the street of pillars to the seaward wall, where gathered the traders and sailors and strange men from the regions where the sea meets the sky. There he stayed long, gazing out over the bright harbor where the ripples sparkled beneath an unknown sun, and where rode lightly the galleys from far places over the water. And he gazed also upon Mount Aran, rising regally from the shore, its lower slopes green with swaying trees and its white summit touching the sky. More than ever, Karanes wished to sail in a galley to the far places of which he had heard so many strange tales, and he sought again the captain who had agreed to carry him so long ago. He found the man, a Thib, sitting on the same chest of spices he had sat on before, and a Thib seemed not to realize that any time had passed. Then the two rowed to a galley in the harbor, and giving orders to the oarsmen, commenced to sail out into the billowy Cyrenian sea that leads to the sky. For several days they glided undulatingly over the water, till finally they came to the horizon where the sea meets the sky. Here the galley paused not at all, but floated easily in the blue of the sky among fleecy clouds tinted with rose. And far beneath the keel, Karanes could see strange lands and rivers and cities of surpassing beauty, spread indolently in the sunshine, which seemed never to lessen or disappear. At length, a Thib told him that their journey was near its end, and that they would soon enter the harbor of Seranian, the pink marble city of the clouds, which is built on that ethereal coast where the west wind flows into the sky. But as the highest of the city's carven towers came into sight, there was a sound somewhere in space, and Karanes awaked in his London garret. For many months after that, Karanes sought the marvelous city of Celephaeus and its sky-bound galleys in vain. And though his dreams carried him to many gorgeous and unheard of places, no one whom he met could tell him how to find Uthnar beyond the Tanarian hills. One night he went flying over dark mountains where there were faint lone campfires at great distances apart, and strange shaggy herds with tinkling bells on their leaders. And in the wildest part of this hilly country, so remote that few men could ever have seen it, he found a hideously ancient wall or causeway of stone zigzagging along the ridges and valleys, too gigantic ever to have risen by human hands, and of such a length that neither end of it could be seen. Beyond that wall in the gray dawn, he came to a land of quaint gardens and cherry trees, and when the sun rose, he beheld such beauty of white and red flowers, green foliage and lawns, white paths, diamond brooks, blue lakelets, carven bridges, and red-roofed pagodas, that he for a moment forgot Celephaeus in sheer delight. But he remembered it again when he walked down a white path toward a red-roofed pagoda, and would have questioned the people of that land about it, had he not found that there were no people there, but only birds and bees and butterflies. On another night, Karanes walked up a damp stone spiral stairway endlessly, and came to a tower window overlooking a mighty plain and river lit by the full moon. And in that silent city that spread away from the river bank, he thought he beheld some feature or arrangement which he had known before. He would have descended and asked the way to Uthnar had not a fearsome aurora sputtered up from some remote place beyond the horizon, showing the ruin and antiquity of the city, and the stagnation of the reedy river, and the death lying upon that land, as it had lain since King Kynarathalis came home from his conquest to find the vengeance of the gods. So Karanes sought fruitlessly for the marvelous city of Celephaeus and its galleys that sailed to Seranian in the sky. Meanwhile, seeing many wonders and once barely escaping from the high priest not to be described, which wears a yellow silken mask over its face and dwells all alone in a prehistoric stone monastery on the cold desert plateau in Leng. In time, he grew so impatient of the bleak intervals of day that he began buying drugs in order to increase his periods of sleep. Hashish helped a great deal, and once sent him to a part of space where form does not exist, but where glowing gases study the secrets of existence, and a violet-colored gas told him that this part of space was outside what he had called infinity. The gas had not heard of planets and organisms before, but identified Karanes merely as one from the infinity where matter, energy, and gravitation exist. Karanes was now very anxious to return to the minaret-studded Celephaeus, and increased his doses of drugs, but eventually he had no money left and could buy no drugs. Then one summer day, he was turned out of his garret and wandered aimlessly through the streets, drifting over a bridge to a place where the houses grew thinner and thinner. It was there that fulfillment came, and he met a cortege of knights come from Celephaeus to bear him thither forever. Handsome knights they were, astride roan horses and clad in shining armor, with tabards of gold, cloth of gold curiously emblazoned. So numerous were they that Corones almost mistook them for an army, but their leader told him they were sent in his honor, since it was he who had created Uth-Nargai in his dreams, on which account he was now to be appointed its chief god forevermore. Then they gave Corones a horse and placed him at the head of the cavalcade, and all rode majestically through the downs of Surrey and onward toward the region where Corones and his ancestors were born. It was very strange, but as the riders went on, they seemed to gallop back through time, for whenever they passed through a village in the twilight, they saw only such houses and villagers as Chaucer or men before him might have seen. And sometimes they saw knights on horseback with small companies of retainers. When it grew dark, they traveled more swiftly, till soon they were flying uncannily as if in the air. In the dim dawn, they came upon the village which Corones had seen alive in his childhood, and asleep or dead in his dreams. It was alive now, and early villagers courtesied as the horsemen clattered down the street and turned off into the lane that ends in the abyss of dream. Corones had previously entered that abyss only at night and wondered what it would look like by day. So he watched anxiously as the column approached its brink. Just as they galloped up the rising ground to the precipice, a golden glare came somewhere out of the east and hid all the landscape in its effulgent draperies. The abyss was now a seething chaos of roseate and cerulean splendor, and invisible voices sang exultantly as the nightly entourage plunged over the edge and floated gracefully down past glittering clouds and silvery coruscations. Endlessly down the horsemen floated, their chargers pawing the aether, as if galloping over golden sands. And then the luminous vapors spread apart to reveal a greater brightness, the brightness of the city of Celephaeus, and the sea coast beyond, and the snowy peak overlooking the sea, and the gaily painted galleys that sail out of the harbor toward distant regions where sea meets the sky. And Corones reigned thereafter over Uth-Nargai and all the neighboring regions of Dream, and held his court alternately in Celephaeus and in the cloud-fashioned Seranian. He reigns there still, and will reign happily forever, though below the cliffs at Innsmouth the channel tides play mockingly with the body of a tramp who had stumbled through the half-deserted village at dawn, played mockingly, and cast it upon the rocks by ivy-covered Trevor Towers, where a notably fat and especially offensive millionaire brewer enjoys the purchased atmosphere of extinct nobility. Sorry if that went on for too long.
All right. Love me some Lovecraft.
Yay.
Power. I tried to plug it in. We've had this.
What was that? Okay.
Pretty cool.
Okay. We're gonna close with Garrett Cook.
All right.
Garrett Cook is gonna read The Earl King by Goethe. So, fucking A, here we go. Let's do it.
The Earl King by Wolfgang von Goethe, translated by Matthew Gregory Lewis. Who is it that rides through the forest so fast, while night frowns around him, while shrill roars the blast? The father who holds his young son in his arm, and close in his mantle has wrapped him up warm. Why trembles my darling? Why shrinks he with fear? O father, my father, the Earl King is near. The Earl King with his crown and his beard long and white. Oh, your eyes are deceived by the vapors of night. Come, baby, sweet baby, with me go away. Fine clothes you shall wear, we will play a fine play. Fine flowers are growing white, scarlet, and blue, on the banks of yon river, and all are for you. O father, my father, and dost thou not hear what words the Errol King whispers low in mine ear? Now hush thee, my darling, my terrors appease. Thou hear'st knit the branches where murmurs the breeze. Oh, baby, sweet baby, with me go away. My daughter shall nurse you, so fair and so gay. My daughter in purple and gold, who is dressed, shall tend you and kiss you and sing you to rest. O father, my father, and dost thou not see the Earl King and his daughter are waiting for me? Oh, shame thee, my darling, 'tis fear makes thee blind. Thou seest dark willows which wave in the wind. I love thee, I dote on thy face so divine. I must and will have thee, and force makes thee mine. My father will hold me now fast. He pulls me, he hurts, and will have me at last. The father, he trembled, he doubled his speed. O'er hills and through forests, he spurred his black steed. But when he arrived at his own castle door, life throbbed in the sweet baby's bosom no more. The end.
Wow.
That was awesome.
That was great.
That was
Very
cool.
good.
Capper, man. That was a great closer, actually.
Very good closer. This is awesome.
That's fine. Thank you.
I'm glad everybody enjoyed it. That was
That was great.
let's see.
I muchly enjoyed that.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was a great read.
Indeed.
So, about an hour, 20 minutes. Not bad.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good job, everybody.
Thank you,
Good
everybody.
job, gal.
Go back to gallery view here for a second. Thanks everybody for coming and reading and sharing your love of spooky stories. It was really cool hearing everybody's different styles too, like the more theatrical and then the ones that have like spooky cadences and stuff. Yeah, this was really a joy. This was actually Garrett's idea, so you can thank him for this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Garrett.
Thanks, Garrett.
Thank you, Garrett.
Ooh.
We thought a fireside kind of spooky story thing would be fun, so, and it was. So tomorrow night you will get to read your own stuff, and that'll be even better.
I don't think I'm better than Gerta, but sure.
What?
And I ain't no Dr. Seuss.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Close. Almost as good. It's better for you.
Yeah, better for me. Yeah, definitely.
Better for your egos and
Yeah.
your, all that. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. And any parting words for the listeners?
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. Yeah.
Thank you for putting this together, Lisa. It was fun.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Have a safe and happy Halloween if you don't see us again.
Anybody doing anything really cool for Halloween?
Yeah. Let's see. Oh yeah. On the day, not so much, but like tomorrow, I'm going to Dan Corr's band's show tomorrow, and then the day after that, me and Dan are going to go see Gojira.
Oh,
That is pretty cool.
The band, not the movie.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
the band. Yeah, the band Gojira. It's a metal.
Oh
band.
yeah, the French metal band. Yeah.
The
Cool.
French metal band. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, the French metal band.
Cool.
I'm
All
gonna
right.
hand
I knew I
out
was good.
candy to people who knock on my door.
What?
I'm gonna hand out candy. It's gonna be super badass.
Are you gonna dress up? You should dress up. Scary.
I'll probably like at the last minute do some marginal half-ass, thing for the kids.
You gotta scare them.
I don't really have
They gotta earn that candy.
I just second the plug. My husband's movie premieres tomorrow night too, which is like his like insane heavy metal tribute to like Bakshi and Fire and Ice and everything tomorrow night.
Sweet.
Lucy Lawless did an interview for Forbes about it, which was funny. So
That's publicity right there.
Don't forget the title, Victoria.
Oh yeah, I put it in the comments. It's called The Spine of Night.
Okay.
And you guys
Spine of Night,
check it out.
Yeah,
I love stuff. I love stuff with spines in it.
Yeah, it is full of spines and a lot of spines being removed. I guarantee it will be one of the goriest movies you have ever seen in your life. So it's up there. So
I was going to say if no spines were removed, I was out, but that's great.
oh no, don't worry. You're going to get some spines. You're going to get anything you want removed. Just will be in this. It's a promise.
Thanks.
Telling us about the shoot at my baby shower. It sounded.
Yep.
Because they were paying people to be naked with sandwiches.
Yeah. I was like, oh no, we didn't pay that. Well, we paid them in food. Yeah, it was like Craigslist ads about like come to a warehouse, be cool with nudity. I'll give you a sandwich. Sign a release.
Just pose with like a 16-inch sub.
Yeah, pretty much. You got a lot of weirdos. The kind of people who would just go to a dark warehouse up on the 3rd floor and just like be like, cool, strip down to your underwear, we gotta get to work, and then have them roll around on wrestling mats. And then no one ever believed it would be made. And then 8 years later, after being hand drawn all those years, it's here.
That's amazing. And so it's going to be streaming, right? When is it?
Yeah, it's going to start streaming tomorrow on all the platforms. And then it will be super limited city releases. So it will be in some cities. It'll be at some of the Alamo draft houses. I don't know where everybody is.
Cool.
Hold on, I might be able to.
That is super cool. So right now, the first premiere is in Providence, right?
No, sadly, it's not playing here.
Oh.
We couldn't get this. Well, one small theater wanted to play it, but they couldn't afford it. So. Yeah, so we might like give them a bootleg copy or something. So it will be playing at the Brattle in Boston, though. That's like closest to us. And it will be playing at the Alamo in Brooklyn, and also another theater in New York, City Village, something like that. Does that sound right?
Very cool.
Very cool.
So everybody go see this crazy movie.
Yeah. If you like the side airbrush side of a van, but like as a movie, then it's in your.
Yeah, I got me and friends out there. I tell them to go to the Wicked Cool Theater. You know what I mean?
And tune in tomorrow night for original work. Thank you, everybody.